Welcome to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear, there's nothing here that bites. Hard anyway. Well, hello there. How enchanting it is to see you return yet again to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and if you'll step this way and look in this display case here, you'll see an assortment of coin dating back to time immemorial. Many of these coins haunted, some of them lucky, and a few of them used as a rite in ancient dark rituals. And it is such a ritual that is at the heart of today's episode of Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. So let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new Netflix film, Damsel. So Damsel's one of those films that I first heard about or even seen the name of it when I was doing my research end of last year, beginning of this year, as to what's coming out in 2024 that I might want to take a look at to talk about on the podcast. And then once I saw it, fantasy film, I did a little research, Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things, it's going to be on Netflix, that makes sense. She seems to do a lot of Netflix work between the Enola Holmes stuff, between Stranger Things, now this. And then I watched the trailer for this, and I thought, okay, it seems interesting enough. I really had an expectation just given the trailer and the way this movie starts out. I mean, it's no spoiler because it is literally the first line of the movie, and they may have even mentioned it in the trailer. It's been a while since I watched that initial trailer, but she says something to the effect of, you heard the stories about damsels in distress. Well, this isn't one of them. And I really had an expectation that this was going to be kind of a down with the patriarchy, girl power sort of movie. And that's not that that's a bad thing. Patriarchy stuff, sometimes I think that's a little overblown as far as a trope in movies. Sometimes it even comes across as pandering. Girl power, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a big difference between movies that have a positive female representation, a positive female empowerment message, that do it deftly and do it nuanced. There's a big difference between that and some movies that just put it in your face and beat you over the head with it. There's a big difference between, okay, we're going to do a fantasy movie about a female protagonist fighting a dragon, and we're going to weave positive female empowerment messages through that. There's a big difference between that and a movie that starts out with, hey, we want to do a movie that's all about female empowerment. Okay, what can we do? Okay, we'll have a positive, strong female fighting a dragon and weave the story around the message. I think that is where a lot of films go wrong. They put the message before the story, and that is where you get movies and TV series that just feel preachy. I don't mind the message, but I want the story to come first. If you craft an interesting story with interesting characters, weave a powerful message through that, like I said, with nuance and deftness, then you've got a good movie or a good TV show. It may not be great, but at the very least, it'll be entertaining and enjoyable to watch. If you put a message and try to weave a story through a message, that's where things get kind of, like I said, preachy. The story's not good. The characters aren't interesting. I feel like I'm being beat over the head. And I don't really want to watch that because I don't enjoy it. I'm not enjoying the story because the story is coming second to the message. So I think you have a interesting tightrope act that some filmmakers and studios and directors and screenwriters have to do this balancing act when trying to do a movie that has a message that you want to put out there, but do it with an interesting story. Now, was Damsel that sort of movie? I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think the message was as in your face as it could have been, as I was afraid it was going to be. I thought I was going to be beat over the head with female empowerment message, which there again, like I said, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not disinterested in that. I applaud that, but I was afraid it was going to be a message first, story second sort of story. And it wasn't that. I think it had an interesting story, that they were a little more nuanced with the message than I was afraid they were going to be. I just think the story lacked. And that to me was a little bit of a disappointment. Right off the bat, I'll tell you this, I enjoyed it well enough. My wife and I sat down and watched this over the weekend, and it was fine. It was an okay movie. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I thought it had a lot of really interesting things. I thought it had really good actors. I really enjoyed the cast in this movie. I thought the special effects were a lot better than I expected them to be. The CG was a lot better than I expected it to be. I just think in trying to craft a story with a strong female lead, they didn't beat me over the head with the message, but they tried too hard to make this character cool and have her do cool things. And then that's where the story kind of suffered. They weren't focusing too much on the message over the story. They were focusing too much on the character over the story. And that's where it's kind of in that middle ground of, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. It was just okay. It was one of those movies where for everything I liked about it, there was something, it was like a point counterpoint. Everything I liked about it had something equally unlikable about it. And that was a real shame because this had a really cool story. I really dug the idea behind it. I thought it was a good vehicle to tell a female empowerment story. And I think they did a good job with that. I'm not complaining about that at all. I think, if any young girls want to watch this movie and they're going to get a positive message about, standing up for yourself and, not depending on anybody but yourself, that sort of situation, and not being controlled by anybody, that's great. And I think this pulls that off. I just think some of the story suffered because they wanted to make this strong female lead a little too cool. And I guess I can't really talk about this much more without getting into spoilers, explaining what I mean. So we're not going to beat around the bush. If you haven't watched Damsel, go check it out on Netflix. It's definitely worth a watch. Like I said, it's not a bad movie. It's just not as good as I think it could have been. And I really wished it was better because it had a good cast. It had some good special effects. It had, two of the big things that any movie can salvage a movie. If you have a really good cast, that can salvage a bad movie. If you have really good effects, that can salvage, for the most part, a bad movie. It didn't need those to salvage it. Like I said, it was an interesting story, a good story. Where I think it failed was just some of the writing. A lot of the plot conveniences that really were a detriment to what was initially a good story. So if you haven't watched it, go check it out. I think it's at least worth an initial watch. And then, see how you feel about it after that. But then come back and listen to my thoughts about Damsel. If you have watched Damsel and you want to hear my thoughts, or you don't care one way or the other, and you're just interested to hear what this movie's about, then we're going to press on into some spoiler territory. So the basic premise is this. You have the Lord of a Land, Ray Winstone, as Lord Bayford, and his wife, Lady Bayford, played by Angela Bassett. She is the stepmother to Ray Winstone's Lord Bayford's two daughters, Elodie, played by Millie Bobby Brown, the oldest daughter, and then the younger daughter, Floria, played by Brooke Carter. They're in this land. The land is kind of desolate, and it just can't support the people. Lord Bayford has run out of money trying to keep his land and his people thriving, so he cuts a deal with a queen to marry off his eldest daughter, Elodie, to the prince of this land in return for riches, dowry, if you will. And they travel to this kind of a remote island nation to make this happen. But once they get there, things kind of turn sour and the rest of the movie plays out. I really like this cast. I thought Millie Bobby Brown was pretty good as Elodie, Princess Elodie. She is a good actress. I think this movie shone a light, and that's that's on a director. A director's main focus and main duty to an actor is to put them in a position to accentuate the things they do really well and to kind of hide the things they don't do really well. And the director of this movie, Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, he did 28 Weeks Later, which I was actually a fan of. Sequels are never as good as the original. 28 Days Later is a horror zombie masterpiece, but 28 Weeks Later I thought was pretty good. That's the only other thing of his that I have seen. And I really enjoyed that, but he directed this, and I thought he did a pretty good job with it. I don't have any real complaints there, but the problem with Millie Bobby Brown as this Princess Elodie is that Millie Bobby Brown, while she is a good young actress, she doesn't do well with acting pain, and she had to do a lot of scenes where she is in excruciating pain, where she's getting burns from the flames of this dragon, and she just doesn't do a good job with that. She screamed like she's pretending she's in pain. She's screaming like somebody that thinks this is how you sound when you're in agonizing pain. And that's not I hope that doesn't come across as a knock on Millie Bobby Brown, because she is a very young actress and she's still learning her craft. Jesus, she's only 20 years old and she is still learning her craft and growing as an actress. And maybe that's something she'll get more comfortable with as she gets older and as she acts more. So that's not a criticism on her. It's just a fact of her skill set as an actress right now. She just didn't really come across as emoting like real torturous pain. And for a character who is in a lot of pain in a lot of this movie, it just really stood out like a sore thumb. Other than that, I thought she did a really good job. Ray Winstone was really good as Lord Bayford. For the limited time he had on screen, he traveled a myriad of emotions, the angst and the anguish of not being able to take care of his kingdom, having to sell off his daughter essentially to a prince, then learning that marrying off his daughter to this family meant sacrificing her for the betterment of his own people, and then realizing the mistake he made, and then going to rectify that and find his daughter, and the sacrifice he makes there of his life to save his daughter when he was willing to sacrifice her life to save his people. It was an interesting and complicated character. I really enjoyed his performance. I wish we could have seen more of him on the screen. The one actress that I really felt got shortchanged in this is Angela Bassett. She plays the stepmother of Elodie and Floria, and she did a really good job with this. I was quite impressed to say, I've seen Angela Bassett in a lot of things, but I don't know as if I've ever seen her in like a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons-y Lord of the Rings type movie, and I wasn't sure how she was going to do with this, but she's a fantastic actress. She's a world-class actress, and she did a great job with this. It's just this character wasn't given a whole hell of a lot to do. One thing I did like about her character is that she is the stepmother. It would have been really easy. In a lot of other stories, she would have been cast as the evil stepmother. And they didn't do that. She actually has a really good relationship with Elodie and Floria. I did find it funny that they constantly called her stepmother. It's kind of the relationship they have. They have a good relationship with her, but she's still the stepmother and has not taken the place of their mother, who has, I'm sure, died of some cause off screen. I don't know as if they ever really explain what happened to Elodie and Floria's mother, but she's still looked at as the stepmother. And it was kind of nice at the very end, after all they've gone through, and Angela Bassett coming to warn Elodie that Floria is, been taken now. They have a closer relationship and a closer bond, and they're going to take care of their nation. And she calls Elodie, Millie Bobby Brown's character, calls Angela Bassett's character mother. And that was a nice little payoff for calling her stepmother the whole movie. But Angela Bassett did a really good job with this. Like I said, she just didn't have a whole lot to do as a character. And that was a little disappointing. I would like to have seen her character a little more, with a little more agency, a little more to do. But there again, excellent job. Brooke Carter as the young Princess Floria did a fine job. Nick Robinson as Prince Henry, I was really impressed with him. What little we got of him on screen, he had an interesting arc where he is a prince and he's just kind of, it really feels like he's going through the motions whenever he's with Elodie, and you think there's something wrong, or maybe it's in the acting, but no, it's his character going through the motions of being with this girl because he knows that there's no use getting emotionally attached or building any chemistry with the princess because they're just going to be sacrificed. As we find out, there's one that's going before Millie Bobby Brown's Elodie character. And I think his character is interesting. The further we go, you realize he doesn't want to be a part of this, but he feels he has to, and he's being coerced into doing this. I'll talk about it once we get to the climax of this, but I thought his character had a really interesting and noble end. The other actor that, a couple other actors I'm going to talk about real quick before we get into the story proper. Robin Wright, of course, playing the antithesis of Buttercup from The Princess Bride. She is the Wicked Queen. And of course, as any good Wicked Queen, she starts off being very benign and very sweet. And then just the cracks in the armor, her interactions with Lady Bayford and her interactions with Millie Bobby Brown's Elodie seem awkward, but she does a good job. I mean, Robin Wright's another world-class actress that I would have liked to have seen more of her being, we got to see a couple scenes where she is full-on evil queen with the Elodie sacrifice and then with the Floria sacrifice. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of her as this character. There was another King Roderick, Queen Isabel's husband, played by Milo Tuomi. I don't even know as if he had any lines in this. This was definitely this woman is the queen regent and he's just the king consort. And what she says goes because she's the one with the real royal blood. So I thought it was kind of funny. My wife and I commenting like the king doesn't say anything in this. But then there was another actor that we don't get to see on screen, but we get to hear on screen, Shohreh Aghdashloo. She's a fantastic actress who's just a laundry list of credits to her name. Of course, the Percy Jackson Sea of Monsters. Probably most recently, she voiced Gozer the Gozerian in Ghostbusters Afterlife. She also had a prominent role in the last seasons of Ozark. But wonderful actress and has a very unique and distinctive voice. And she voiced the dragon in this, and she did a really good job with voicing this dragon. She just had a tone and tenor to her voice that felt timeless. It felt like this is a creature that has been around since the dawn of time without sounding old, if you get what I'm saying. There was just a agelessness to her performance that really felt like this was the voice of this dragon. I did like the fact that they had a talking dragon, because in so many fantasies, especially on the written page, like The Hobbit, you had, Smaug the dragon talked. And I like having that. I like having the traditional badass dragons that are just creatures like in Game of Thrones. But I like the old school fantasy intelligent dragons that are a character unto themselves. And I thought that the one they had in this was really cool. And Shohreh Aghdashloo did a wonderful job in this voice acting role. Now, for the most part, the beginning of this movie, the first act, I enjoyed it. As a typical fantasy, I thought it was really good. I liked the bit we get in the land of the Bayfords and the anguish of trying to keep their nation and to keep their lands thriving, and it's just not working out, and having to go to this other kingdom to marry off the daughter. That was all very interesting. Once they got there, it was very interesting seeing how things played out. The sets, I mean, for as big as this castle was, the sets felt very small and cramped, especially the wedding one. I thought it would just be more big and opulent, and it was like in this tiny courtyard. So I was a little disappointed in that. But I thought the costuming was really good. The sets were all really good as far as the looks of them. While they may have lacked in the scale, the looks were really cool. It's when we get to the sacrifice, and even setting up of the mystery of the sacrifice. And as it goes on, you're starting to piece things together. There's another princess-looking girl that Millie Bobby Brown sees. She sees something going up, flames up on the cliff. She's hearing about ancient rituals and things like that. So you start to slowly piece together what's going on here. And then by the time you have the wedding, and then they take the trek up to the side of the mountain to this cave entrance, and the ritual that they do there with the tossing of the dragon coin, the mixing of the blood, and then him carrying her off. And I'm like, oh no. And then when he whispers to her sorry and then drops her over the edge, that's where business really picked up for the film. But then that's where you get a lot of the things that really don't make sense with this movie. And even at first, you get a lot of really cool scenes. She's walking through these caves and she comes to this big open cave. And all of a sudden, they have all these birds that are living in these cages come flying out on fire. And it's a stunning visual to watch. And then it is heartbreaking and terrifying that these birds are all on fire and flying out, trying to get away from something and dropping dead. It was, like I said, probably one of the most stunning scenes of this movie, and really, for me, it was beautiful to look at, for as terrifying as it was. But once she has the confrontation with the dragon, and then she's off into the caves trying to evade this dragon, that's for the most part what this is. You know, her going through these caves trying to evade this dragon and find her way out of this cave system. It was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it, but there were just so many things along the way that just were too convenient. And the first couple, I kind of understood, because she is in this very opulent wedding gown for a royal, medieval looking wedding. The women that are attending to her put things in her dress that I'm like, okay, they're focusing on this, so it's got to mean something. I just don't know if it was meant to be purposeful or just her being resourceful, because there was a little ball with some sort of oil in it that she uses to make a light for herself. And at first I'm like, oh, that's convenient because she's in a cave and she's going to need to see. And she's using something that doubles as a little lantern for her. That's terribly convenient. But then I thought, okay, well, maybe the women that were attending to her and dressing her did that on purpose, because they knew where she was going. They knew what was going to happen to her. They knew that she was going to need light. They put this thing on her little sash around her waist, so she could have a light while she's in there. They put something, it's not sharp enough to be a knife, but it is knife shaped, shove it down her bodice. And that comes into play later because she needs something that acts as a bit of a knife. And it almost makes me wonder if these were traditional parts of this garb for a wedding, or if these ladies in waiting or these attendants put these in her because they knew it might help her. They're just servants. They're not beholden to the queen and her evil ways. So I could look past that. I don't know, like I said, whether these implements that are a part of her dress were put there on purpose by servants who just want to help this girl out, or if it's supposed to be a sign of her resourcefulness. I'm not sure, but there are bigger crimes. And at first I'm like, okay, these are all convenient. I was afraid that little light of mine wasn't going to shine for very long with what little oil was in it. And I was afraid it was going to last longer than it humanly should have. But it ended up going out. So I'm like, okay, cool. They're not making this too easy for her. But then she gets to this other cave and she jumps across the thing and uses the boob knife to claw her way back up, and then finds these like glowworms. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So what does she do? She finds these glowworms, puts them in a little satchel, and now she's got a glowworm nightlight that she's carrying around. I was like, that's convenient. Then she gets to that cave. Just after that, the dragon shows up and she ends up evading it and getting into this other cave where other princesses have apparently gotten this far, and she sees visions of all these princesses that have wound up in this safe space, and one of them draws a map, and we see a flashback of her drawing this map, and she draws a way out where you see sunshine out of the mountain. And my wife's like, so she found the way out and then came back to draw this on the wall? And I was like, apparently. So that was kind of silly and not very well thought out from a writing standpoint. And then these glowworms, she's got burns on her body from her encounters with this dragon. And these glowworms that are providing light for her, they're also healing her. They have they secrete some sort of mucus that heals people, and all her burns are healed because of the magic glowworms that are providing her light and providing her healing. And I'm like, that's terribly, terribly convenient. Hell, they might as well just said the glowworms can chew their way through rock and dig her a tunnel straight out of here. That makes about as much sense as everything else the glowworms do for her to make things convenient in this scenario. And then I found it quite funny as well that the exit that she finds takes her to an opening in this mountain that is about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way up this mountain. So it's not an escape. It's not an exit. It just drops off. And she finds that she's still trapped. And the princess that came before her that found this exit is lying there dead. Her rotting corpse is laying there in this little entrance. So how in the world did she get back to that other cave to draw that there was a way out there? It's just, a lot of things that didn't make sense. Now, the one thing I did like is the fact that Lord Bayford and some of his men come back to find Elodie. And I thought that was a noble thing, a little bit of redemption for this character, especially when he sacrifices himself in effort to save his daughter. I was glad to see that. And then she gets out only to find that her sister, Floria, is being quickly married off to the prince so she can be sacrificed because, and I guess I didn't go over this, but you've probably seen this, or maybe if you didn't see it and you don't care about the spoilers, this ritual is because back who knows how long ago, hundreds of years ago, a king came to this dragon's lair and killed the dragon's 3 young daughters under false pretenses that he was going to save the kingdom from this dragon that's been terrorizing them. The dragon punishes the king by saying that every year he must sacrifice 3 of his bloodline to this dragon in payment for the daughters that the dragon lost. The young princess that Elodie saw at the castle earlier, she was the first one. Elodie was going to be the second one, and then as we see at the end, there was going to be a third sacrifice. Since Elodie did not become the sacrifice, they thought Floria was then sacrificed to the dragon. And once Elodie finds that out, then it becomes action hero Elodie. Which I didn't mind that. I'm okay with that. That's, she's the hero of this story. She is the protagonist. And you want her being badass and fighting this dragon. Now, I know some people probably have a problem with this. She's just a girl and, how is she going to fight a dragon? And they never really establish the bona fides that she would have the skill set required to fight dragons. And I know what the kids would call that being a Mary Sue or some sort of drivel like that. And I don't mind that. There are some circumstances where, somebody fighting somebody much bigger than them is a little ridiculous. In this circumstance, it is fantasy, and nobody could fight a dragon. A creature that large, breathing fire, I dare say that not even the greatest of warriors, not even Arnold Schwarzenegger in his Conan the Barbarian prime could defeat a dragon in real life. This is fantasy. And I do like the sense that, she's not waiting to be saved. And that's kind of the message of this movie. She's not a damsel in distress. She's taking matters into her own hands, not waiting to be saved. And she's doing what she has to do to save her sister. And that kind of resilience and that sort of, like I said, mentality of not waiting for somebody else to come along and save, getting your ass in gear and doing what has to be done, I think is a great message. And a message that I really enjoy about this, even above where I thought it could have gone in the whole down with the patriarchy stuff or girl power. I think this is a message that young girls are going to get and a good message for young girls. But I think it's also a good message for anybody. Don't wait for somebody else to pull you out of the mud. Get your ass up, fight, claw, dig, get yourself out of the predicament you're in. And the fight with her and the dragon I thought was pretty cool. I'll get into what I liked about this dragon a little later, but I liked the fight between her and the dragon. I thought the way she defeated the dragon was interesting, with the rock formations that kind of curve up and taunting the dragon to blast her with her fire breath, and the fire kind of wafting around and burning the dragon. I thought that was kind of neat and kind of interesting. But then I slowly started to realize, oh shit, I know what's going to happen, because Elodie starts to tell the dragon that the dragon hasn't been killing people of royal blood. She's been killing innocent commoners who have had royal blood put into them, so to speak, when they do the blood brother thing where they cut the hands and put them together. And I'm like, okay, she's going to heal the dragon with the glowworms, and then she's going to go Khaleesi on them and wreck their day. And that's essentially what happened. She used the glowworms to heal the dragon, and then, she saves her sister, and they have that moment at the castle where the prince is going to marry the third princess and, of course, sacrifice her and telling her to run. And then the dragon showing up. And I kept waiting for her to say Dracarys, but she didn't, because of probably copyright reasons. But then the dragon quite possibly kills other innocent people. Maybe they were complicit, maybe they weren't. But I think the three general people that the dragon was trying to kill was the queen, the king, and the prince. And I really liked that scene, because the prince, he's had hesitation about this. He knows it's wrong. He's tried to stop it, but, he feels compelled by his overbearing mother to go along with this. And he meets his end with a bit of nobility, because he looks up at the dragon and then stern-jawed, closes his eyes, and it had a look of, I know I've done wrong, I know I deserve this, and I'm going to meet my fate with honor and whatever nobility I can muster. The queen, on the other hand, was yelling and screaming and in a rage as she burns up. And I thought that was a really interesting end to those characters. I quite liked that. And then they kind of had a cheesy shot with Elodie walking down this road, this bridge road, with the flaming castle in the background. It felt very action hero-y. She's walking all in slow motion. And then they do a shot, like almost down at her feet, looking up at her, with the dragon flying overhead. And it almost reminded me of that scene in Game of Thrones where Daenerys standing there and the dragon's behind her, but you can't, her body's blocking out the dragon, and you see those dragon wings span out, and they almost look like they're coming out of her. It kind of felt like they were mirroring that. There was definitely some Daenerys Targaryen vibes about this, only with Millie Bobby Brown being a good guy, not a bad guy. But I don't think they really thought it through, because, that dragon went scorched earth on this castle, and you can't tell me that innocent people didn't die in that. Maybe some complicit people, but a lot of innocent people, I'm sure, died. I didn't see anybody running from the castle. So I don't know if all those people that Elodie told to run, I don't know if they got very far before that dragon burnt the shit out of everything. But there again, it's all to make the hero, make the Elodie character look cool. You know, it's a cool shot with the castle all in flames and her slow-mo walking down the road. It's a cool shot to have her with the dragon overhead and its wings spread, and it almost looks like the Khaleesi shot. It's cool to show her with the burns from this dragon, but we can't have her with all these infected wounds, so we've got to find a way to heal her. We've got her in this cave, but we got to give her some cool toys like a Batman utility belt to help her get through traversing these caves. It's just, there was a lot of things that they did to make the character either look cool or to make things easier for the character and to make things very convenient for the character. Not that the character didn't have, some setbacks and some falls. I don't think they made the journey easy for this character. She paid the price, both physically, emotionally, with her father and with her sister being sacrificed and having to go after her sister. It wasn't necessarily an easy journey for this character, and I appreciated that, but they really gave her a lot of help along the way from a plot armor standpoint that I just, sometimes it felt a little silly. But ultimately, I think everybody did a good job. Millie Bobby Brown, like I said, other than the fact that she can't scream like she's really in pain, she screams like she thinks it sounds when somebody's really in pain. I thought she did a good job. I love the acting. I liked the dialogue for the most part. It felt very of a medieval fantasy period. There was one line where Floria said something, and I was like, oh, that sounds like how some kid would say it today. But all in all, I thought the dialogue was really good. The script was pretty good. The story was interesting, other than, like I said, some little plot conveniences for Elodie that just kind of didn't take me out of it, but I was like, oh, come on, are you serious? Glowworms? Healing glowworms? The one thing I really dug was the dragon. I thought the dragon looked really good. For a CG dragon, I mean, there were times where you're like, oh yeah, this is CG, but then there were other times I thought it looked really good and, rivaled some other shows that have dragons. Maybe it's not Game of Thrones level dragons, but probably one of the better CG dragons. I like what they did with the flames of the fire. It wasn't necessarily fire. It almost had a liquidity to it, almost like it was spraying out napalm of some sort. And that I thought was cool. It was almost like a napalmy lava flame sort of conglomeration that was different enough for me, and didn't come across as just your typical fire-breathing dragon. And it looked cool, and it worked with this dragon breathing fire down these caves, and it's not just the flame, it's almost this, like I said, this liquidity rolling towards her until it stops, and I thought it was really cool. I like the eyes with the kind of sideways pupils that I've seen, from time to time in various things, especially with dragons. I thought that was a nice touch. Shohreh Aghdashloo did an amazing job with the voice acting for the dragon. This, like I said, that dragon felt very timeless and like a creature that has been around for millennia or more and has been a part of this. And you heard the anguish, you heard the anger, you heard the rage, that sad insanity that comes along with that after, however many years, hundreds of years of just being hell-bent on revenge and getting even. She did a good job with all of that. So all in all, I like this. I thought it was an interesting story. Maybe not pulled off without any problems, but I think, some of the things that I didn't like, for everything I didn't like, there was a thing I liked. For everything I liked, there was a thing I didn't like. But I guess the things that I didn't like weren't enough to make me not enjoy watching this. There again, much like Imaginary that we talked about on Monday, it's another one of those films that, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was okay. It was a fine movie to watch. It was entertaining to watch, and I'll probably never watch it again, but I'd be interested to see where the story goes from there if they did a sequel. Same with this. I didn't hate this. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed it well enough. My wife and I enjoyed it. We both kind of poked fun at some of the plot inconsistencies and some of the continuity gaffes. You know, one scene where Millie Bobby Brown's character has this big burn wound on this shoulder, and in the next scene, after the glowworms have healed it, the scar is over on the other shoulder. You'll have shit like that happening. You know, they film things out of order sometimes, or they flip scenes, and you know, you'll have that sometimes. But we both enjoyed it well enough. Not a movie we'll watch again, but if they came out with a Damsel 2, I can't say I wouldn't watch that. And as I've said before, if I enjoy the movie, if I have a fun time watching it, then is it really that bad? And I did. I enjoyed this well enough. It's not high drama, and it's not Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, but it was a fun enough watch, and I enjoyed it. And like I said, it had a good message that I didn't really feel beat over the head with. They didn't beat me out over the head with down with the patriarchy. They didn't beat me over the head with girls rule and boys drool or, you know, any sort of thing like that. But they had a good, positive female empowerment character that I quite enjoyed. It was a little over the top at times in the action hero-ness of it, but for the most part, I enjoyed the whole thing. And like I said, it was a fine enough movie to watch. Not great, but not horrible. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Damsel. You can check it out now on Netflix if you haven't. And maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. But hey, that's the nature of the beast. And I don't do this to get everyone to agree with me. I just do this to give you an idea of what I thought about it. And maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree. Maybe you thought this movie was hot garbage, and hey, you know what? That's everyone's right to think about a movie whatever they will. But if you love this, you may have loved it more than I did, because I didn't love this. I liked it well enough, but I'm sure there's some people out there that just love this movie, and they're not wrong either. But, you know, these are my thoughts on it. Hopefully you liked it better than I did. Hopefully you at least liked it as much as I did. If you didn't like it at all, then, hey, you know what? There's always next time. But I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Damsel. Check it out now on Netflix. You can find out more about what's going on with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe on our Facebook page and our Instagram page, always posting about horror, fantasy, and science fiction, as well as about our latest episodes. No matter where you listen to this podcast, like, follow, subscribe it, whatever you got to do to stay on top of all the latest episodes. We've got some random curiosities that pop up from time to time, some bonus episodes that pop up from time to time, and of course, please leave those reviews. 5 stars would be awesome. Whatever review you leave, we appreciate it. And as always, share this podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So until next time. Thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe.